In the spring of 2019, Kurt Busch ran a throwback scheme paying homage to his Southwest Tour days. At his home track of Las Vegas Motor Speedway, he would run the Star Nursery scheme. The opportunity he got to drive the Star Nursery 70 back in the late 90s helped propel him to a Hall of Fame career in the NASCAR Cup Series. But the only reason this opportunity was even available was because the previous driver, who was also a Las Vegas local, had his life and career cut far too short. In the mid to late 90s, Chris Trickle was viewed as one of NASCAR's brightest prospects. He began his racing career at a very young age, first racing motorcycles before turning to stock cars in 1990 at just the age of 18. His famous last name isn't a coincidence either. He is the nephew of short track racing legend Dick Trickle. With that famous connection, he was destined to get some opportunities, but he still had to prove himself. In 1992, he was the Las Vegas Bull Ring's Rookie of the Year, winning 3 times in 18 starts, earning him a third-place points finish. The next year, he picked up 10 wins in the Southern California Sportsman Series and another 8 in 1994. By 1995, he had caught the attention of some teams in the NASCAR Southwest Series. Owner Craig Keogh, who was the owner of the Star Nursery number 70 Monte Carlo, saw his talent and decided to give him an opportunity. His first season in 1995 was a transitional one, making only 13 of 17 starts, only scoring a single top 10, but also scored a pole, showcasing his tremendous raw speed. In his sophomore season, everything began to click. It would be the only full-time season he would run in the Southwest Series, finishing 4th in the overall standings, scoring 6 top 5s and 9 top 10s, along with what would turn out to be his only Southwest victory, fittingly at the Bull Ring, where he would put on a perfect performance, not only winning the pole, but led all 125 laps. That same year, they also attempted to qualify for 2 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races, but DNQ'd. Craig Keogh still had a lot of faith in his driver. The plan for 1997 was to run another full-time season in the Southwest Series, while also trying to attempt his first Truck Series start, with the hopes of racing full-time, potentially in 1998. He started off the 1997 season looking like a true championship contender, scoring the pole in the first race and scoring back-to-back top 5 finishes. February 2nd, 1997 at Phoenix would turn out to be the final race of Chris Trickle's short career. In the stands that day watching him was a 16-year-old Kurt Busch. He looked up to him and thought if he could make it to that level as someone from his hometown, maybe someday he could too. Unfortunately, Chris would never get a chance to experience that opportunity. At around 9 p.m. on the night of February 9th, 1997, he left the apartment he shared with his girlfriend. The plan was to meet up with a friend for a late night game of tennis. He changed into his NASCAR Letterman jacket and sweats, picked up his tennis racket, got in his convertible, and drove off. He eventually pulled onto Blue Diamond Road, heading eastbound towards the I-15 overpass. About 10 minutes after he drove away from home, he was shot between the eyes. The convertible spun off the road and settled to a stop. The bullet fragmented and lodged into Trickle's brain. He spent more than a year drifting in and out of a coma as a result. The racing community rallied around the grieving family, but finally, 409 days later, on March 25th, 1998, Trickle's lungs aspirated and fell into cardiac arrest in the emergency room at Sunrise Hospital, ending his life. The Trickles offered a $35,000 reward to anyone who could provide information leading to the killer. The case was also featured in 2 episodes of America's Most Wanted, airing first in April of 1997 and again in February of 2001, just 2 days before that year's Daytona 500. He was eventually tracked down in the Los Angeles County Jail, where he was locked up on a domestic violence charge. He thought he stumbled onto a traffic accident that night and offered nothing to the case. Also at the time of the shooting, Nevada law limited murder prosecution to only 1 year and a day. But in 1999, Nevada passed a law called the Chris Trickle bill, which removed the time limit on prosecution for murder charges. Unfortunately, this applies only to cases that took place after it was instituted, meaning that if the murderer even came forward or was found, they could not be charged. At the time of the shooting, Busch had no indication that the event would serve as the catalyst for his own racing career. Craig Keogh contacted him shortly after. They were due to make a stop in Las Vegas, and he had no driver. It was Busch, who had started just 7 races at that level and was only 19 years old. But that night, a packed house of 2,000 fans watched Kurt Busch race to victory. He would go on to win the 1999 Southwest Championship, and I guess you could say the rest is history. If it weren't for the death of Chris Trickle, there's a chance you might not have heard the name Kurt Busch. He invited Trickle's family to his 2004 championship banquet, with only his father Chuck showing up. His mother Barbara had very strong feelings on how things turned out, even going as far as to say that Chris was a much better person. But Kurt Busch was not bitter at all, as he totally understood the mother's feelings. As for Chuck, he continued to race in his son's memory at the bull ring, even winning the track championship in 2003 before retiring shortly after. The Chris Trickle Classic is held at the bull ring every year in honor of his memory. Kurt Busch feels in his heart that Chris was destined for NASCAR success, going on to say he had the family support, the name, the NASCAR connection. I felt he was going to make it to that elite level of racing because of his surroundings, his ability, everything was in place. Chris was a person who young racers could look up to. Chris Trickle was 25 years old. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.
After he was shot, one of his doctors had suggested to my grandparents that they save his sperm in case he lived and wanted to have kids one day. I never had the chance to meet him, and I was born 3 years after he died.
Cole's grandparents discussed having a grandchild. 2 close family friends offered to carry the child and raise him. Little did they know the pregnancy would result in twins for Chris posthumously. Cole and his sister JoLynn raised here in Las Vegas until JoLynn moved away.
It's emotional because there is, like I said, there's no one else I can go to and relate to with it necessarily.
Cole is hopeful he'll one day have closure in knowing who stole his father's life.
I hope they know that their actions really affected so many people in a way that they can't imagine. And I hope they know that they need to come forward at some point and take responsibility for that.
The night that he was shot was a dream that was not true. I still don't believe it as a real thing. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as it didn't happen. And for years and years and years, that's what I keep thinking, you know. And I keep thinking he's going to walk in my house one day and where he lived and come out and say, "Hi, Dad." And it was not real. I cry too much. He comes to a place like this race today, you know, he should be out there. My mother said to me once, she says, "Chuck, you know why people still talk about him? Because he was not supposed to go."